Okay, this afternoon, it's May 2nd, 2016, Monday. I'm interviewing Bill Murphy. He's the chairman of GATA, which means Gold Antitrust Action Committee. Their website is gata.org. Um, yeah, Bill used to work in the financial markets back in the 70s in commodities, but I'll let him introduce himself and talk a little bit about GATA and what they do.
Well, thanks for having me here, Mario. Yeah, I do have some background in commodities, and that had my own firm once in New York City, and a small one, and there was a limited position trader at one time, and have traded many of the futures markets. So I have that background, and it's helped me to understand the market movements because I watch them on a daily basis, and it that's the one thing I'm good at. We all have certain things we're good at in life, and that's what I can do, and I've noticed the abnormalities in the gold and silver markets are off the charts. They just don't trade like any markets in history. It's because they're rigged by this gold cartel
Yeah.
we can get into.
Yeah, I mean, and I've known you since I think 2002 because I started following gold, and I was I was a futures broker for 20 years, so I've got kind of the same background as you, and I used to notice the gold market traded like no other market, and that's when I started contacting you. We've been in contact for quite a few years through email, and sometimes I have called you in the past. And it's interesting. I remember I used to send you, charts, from work. Look what happened, and so can you tell me, how you discovered, or when did you first suspect that there was manipulation in the precious metals market?
That's a good question, Mario. It was really simple. Uh, Long term, 2 weeks after I started my website, themetropolcafe.com, long-term capital management blew up. And we had heard that they were short some 300 or 400 tons of gold, which they, whether it was the Bank of Italy or whatever, they bought it, and they were leasing in the market, and they were selling the gold and using the funds for their operations. Well, when they blew up, they had to liquidate all their positions. I mean, it was a big scandal back in 1998 in September.
Yeah.
And we know that meant that they would have to cover their gold short position. So all of a sudden, gold was less than 300. Every time it got above 300, then I noticed a peculiar selling and got word like you would as a broker that it was Goldman Sachs and J.P. Morgan and Deutsche Bank, and it was and
Yeah.
every time it would go up, but to make it, it would go right back
Yeah.
down. And I heard some other things, and I realized that there was the bullion banks were manipulating the price to prevent it from going up.
Yeah,
And
and
so,
I remember, back then and up until the maybe I don't know 2007 or 8, the Comex used to trade in the pit, and now it's all done electronically. But back then, if J.P. Morgan got an order and passed it on to the pit, the brokers on the floor in New York, you say, oh, JP Morgan's selling and Goldman Sachs is selling. Nowadays, you can't even tell anywhere because it's all done electronically. And so, so you think it, what about, prior to LTCM, you've talked about this and I've read a lot of the stuff, that you've put out, and I've read some other websites. There's talk about Robert Rubin, the former Treasury Secretary under Clinton, who was also chairman of Goldman Sachs or CEO of Goldman Sachs before he went to be Secretary of the Treasury, and you argue that he was the architect, I think, of this, you know, keeping the price of gold down through leasing the metal, and at the same time making a lot of money from it. Can you talk about that, Robert Rubin and Clinton, how that's connected to the gold manipulation?
and it's the best part about this, it's fact. I mean, I know a fellow, Brian Hinchcliffe, who used to work for Goldman Sachs and Robert Rubin way back when, and they would borrow. Rubin started borrowing gold from central banks and leasing onto the marketplace and using it as cheap money. And my fellow, followed him doing this. It was Aaron and Company, but way back then.
Yeah.
Sachs took it over, and then when Robert Rubin became Secretary of Treasury, he made it the essence of the strong dollar policy. Because I always asked, years ago, you always heard about strong dollar policy. Well, what did that mean? Nobody could give me an answer.
Yeah, plus with with the trade deficits and current account deficits that the U.S. has accumulated over the last 30, 40 years, how can you have a strong dollar, and how are you going to do it? So
well, I used to raise my hand and say that the essence was to manipulate the gold price, and
yeah,
that's what he did when he became Secretary of Treasury. And it was right about then that Will McDonough, the New York Fed, and Alan Greenspan joined the BIS, which by Congress it said they weren't allowed to do it. They just did it.
yeah.
And the BIS in Switzerland is where a lot of the gold control and manipulation, it all stems from.
Yeah, because I guess the Fed has an account with the BIS, and the BIS can do all the leasing and selling for the Fed.
Well, it's the BIS in Switzerland is the central bank.
Yeah, yeah. But the thing is, if you call the BIS to ask them about that, they can't divulge because they say, oh, it's private client information. But, when you think about it, the Federal Reserve supposed to be, like a government institution, but
well, the whole gold world is that way. It's all when it comes to officialdom, it's all about not saying anything and not telling the truth and keeping it private. And I mean, we haven't had an audit of the U.S. Fed and of our gold reserves since 1955. I mean, it's a joke.
Yeah. Well, I've listened to Jim Rickards. And he said the reason they don't do an audit is because it would give too much importance to gold. I'm not too sure about that reasoning.
Oh, that's horse manure.
Yeah.
It's a joke. I mean, who outside of people like us and then certain people in the financial world, who in the world gives a crud how much gold the U.S. has? It's a number. 8,135.5 tons.
Yeah.
2,000 tons. We don't think they have the gold. That's what they're afraid of. They don't want to expose. They don't have the gold they say they have.
Yeah.
It's swapped and with other countries and sold out. And when we asked the Fed about this, Bill Dudley, he wouldn't answer the question.
Yeah, I saw that. It was a few weeks ago, wasn't it?
Yep.
Was it someone from GATA who asked him? Or?
It was just a friend of mine who I've known for 15 years who saw him speak at VMI and asked him the question about the United States had swapped gold with anybody, whether with somebody else or foreign country. And he said, I'm not going to answer that question.
Yeah, I made a video a few weeks ago about how Paul Volcker, when he was president of the New York Fed in the mid-'70s, he was in contact with the Vatican. And they actually allowed New York Fed to use the Vatican's gold for leasing. Have you seen that one?
Yeah, and excuse me, we think they've done quite a bit of that, which is why Dudley wouldn't answer the question.
Yeah, yeah. So, another question is like a few, now with the Deutsche Bank story that came out a few weeks ago, they're admitting they manipulated the fix, which in my opinion, the fix, might be manipulated, but that's only the tip of the iceberg because it's not. The problem is the constant leasing and selling of gold, when gold should go up and like on the COMEX open and COMEX close. So I think Deutsche Bank is interesting, but it's not really, if they say that's manipulation, yes, it is, but it's only the tip of the iceberg. And my question is about the CFTC hearings on silver. You were there, weren't you? And can you talk a bit about that? And the fact that the CFTC came out and said, oh, there's nothing to see there.
Well, March 25th, 2010, I testified in front of the CFTC, which was an interesting story, really, because it was on the internet and televised, and the only thing that was blanked out was my testimony. They said it was just a fluke. Are you kidding me? Does anybody believe that?
Problems.
I was the only one.
Yeah.
That was, not allowed to be seen. We explained to them what was going on, and of course they just don't want to hear it. And it's then eventually they concluded a little while back a 5-year investigation about the silver market, about whether there was manipulation and fraud. And they said they couldn't find anything. And this is, to me, is unbelievable for you people that watch your show.
Yeah.
they've had the bullion. The same people have been fined, and it's been in the press, and they have been convicted, or whatever you call it, of manipulating the energy market,
Yeah.
the straight market, the dollar, the housing market, oil market. I mean everything. And I mean, I think J.P. Morgan has paid 30 billion in fines over a period of 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
They've all had to pay these enormous fines. Nobody goes to jail, of course.
Yeah.
So the only market in the whole world they're involved in which they have not been fined, or one of the only ones, is silver.
Yeah.
It's the most obvious one of all.
I know. I know. And the other another question I wanted to ask, oh, the other thing I wanted to point out about that they cut off your testimony is that, you know, I think you said you've been on CNBC in the US once and then never again. I noticed sometimes you're on CNBC Asia. Can you talk a little bit about that? That, you know, how the mainstream financial press in the US doesn't give you, you know, the time of the day.
Yeah. After GATA was formed, I was on CNBC with Ron and Sonnen. I don't know how that happened, but once they heard what I had to say, forget it.
Yeah.
But in Asia, Bernie Lowe has moved from Bloomberg to CNBC, and he's a big gold guy. He's the smartest guy and the nicest guy you ever want to meet. And he gives my colleague Chris Powell and I the time of day and to say what we want to say. And he gets right into the nitty gritty. He doesn't hold back at all. I mean, he's such a breath of fresh air. And as far as the U.S., we know. We met in London, John Embry and Chris Powell, and I met Claudia Carpenter, the gold reporter, for forever.
Yeah, I used to be in contact with her, you know, when I was still working in the city. I used to talk to her a lot, and she used to call me to ask about the gold market.
Well, she told us that she's not allowed to mention GATA. That's a fact.
Yeah.
Not allowed to mention us.
I guess CNBC Asia, they don't mind because most Americans are asleep when that show is on.
They don't see it.
Most they don't see it. So
no.
Yeah, yeah. And what else? Oh yeah, the other question is about Gold Rush 21, which was a GATA conference in Dawson City in 2005. If you could talk a little bit about that and the Russian official that was there.
Well, it was a super conference. I mean, it was just great memories. And before the gold price took off, it was 436 that day.
Yeah.
And we had, Eric Sprott there and John Embry and some of the big names in the whole industry. And actually some companies actually came back then. Agnico Eagle was represented. And one of the fellows there who wanted to come was Andrei Bykov, who was a top economic consultant to President Putin of Russia.
Yeah.
He said it was the best conference he'd ever been to. And he went back to Russia, and a day later, the price of gold began to take off.
Yeah.
It went up to from 436 to 700 in a matter of 9 months, which is percentage-wise a big increase.
Yeah.
And we think that he took what GATA had to say about what was happening back to Russia, and they helped goose the price.
That's interesting. What about the Chinese? Do you think they're aware of what's going on in the gold market, like the Russians?
Well, we know they are from a few WikiLeaks comments that have been disseminated, but most importantly, from my standpoint, I've had 3 conference calls with the Chinese Investment Corporation, which is their sovereign wealth fund years ago, and I know they know what we know.
Yeah. So maybe China, officially they've increased their gold holdings lately, but it's nowhere near where a lot of people think it should be. Do you think they're buying it through people like their sovereign wealth fund, buying more gold than we think they have?
Well, a decade ago, my contacts told me they were buying it through Australia and different sources, and all of a sudden they announced went up to then 450 tons. We believe in it, just by the numbers and what's happening, that it's many thousands of tons that they own, and there's all sorts of numbers thrown out there, but we believe they've just been buying and buying and buying since the year 2000. I know we had a conference in the beginning in Durban, South Africa, and we know they were scouring South Africa back then.
So to wrap up our interview, what do you think? How do you think the manipulation and the gold price? How do you think it's all going to unravel? What do you think can make it unravel and let the gold price go to where it should be, its natural free market level?
Well, it's just my opinion, Mario, but I think that the gold cartel, which is the bullion banks, the U.S. government, the Fed, the Treasury, and other central banks, the BIS, they're going to blow up. The physical market will overpower their ability to keep the prices suppressed. As I said, like just the last 2 days, sell 50,000 contracts in the COMEX. You know how big that is. I can
Yeah.
never recall this. So
50,000 contracts. I mean, that's a lot.
in 2 days,
Yeah. Yeah.
to keep it from going through
Mm.
1,300. So they're going to go all out, especially silver, because they know if silver gets to 1850, it's probably going to go bonkers.
Yeah.
So they're going all out to keep the prices from exploding. But they've been doing this all year, and they're getting beat.
Yeah.
And that's what's different compared to the past 5 years.
I see. So, yeah, I saw today gold traded up above 1,300, and that was before the official open on COMEX, which is 8:20 a.m. New York time. And then when COMEX opened, you could see it drop straight away to, like, it was 1304, and then it went 1301, and then we've been dropping all morning. I'm not sure where we're now, but I agree with you. There's been a lot of talk about how all the commercial short positions are getting huge and gold's going to correct and silver's going to dump, and they don't. So maybe this is going to be the term you coined, the commercial signal failure, isn't it?
Yeah, and I don't know if it's going to happen this time, but
Yeah.
I know before gold and silver explode, which they're going to, that's what's going to happen. It has to. This is like the last stand.
All right.
It's going to be a tipping point when the physical markets overpower these bad guys, and you're going to see gold and especially silver go bonkers.
Custer's last stand.
That's it.
So, Bill, it was nice talking to you, and my first interview is with you, which is great because you woke me up to what was really happening in the precious metals market like 12 years ago or more. So thanks for taking the time to do this interview, and hopefully we'll do another one soon.
I hope so, and thank you, Mario. Let's do one when some of this we're talking about actually is taking place in terms of the upside.
Yeah, great. Take care. Thanks.
Thanks, Mario. Bye-bye.
Bye.